Welcome to this presentation about the biomechanics of the tennis backhands. My goal is to make this presentation as practical as possible to help you better understand and observe the performance factors of the one- and two-handed backhand. So I created several slow motion videos to illustrate what I'm saying and to help you better use this tool to analyze your players. If you want to have more scientific data about the backhand, I invite you to read my paper, which is a review of scientific literature on the backhand and which is in free access. I will briefly present you the different variations for the one- and two-handed backhand, starting with the one-handed backhand. There are two major variations that are related to the grip. The first version is the classic grip with the hand mainly on the top of the handle. It's the one you start with and that is also used for backhand volley and slice. The second one is the extreme grip with the hand more behind the handle that is used to generate more topspin and to deal with higher contact points. In general, the contact point with extreme grips is further in front of the body with the hips and trunk rotating further, opened at the net at about 45 degrees, while the trunk is more sideways with classic grip. Regarding the two-handed backhand, a study analyzed the combination of grips for top and bottom hands among the top 100 ATP and WTA players. The results showed that the vast majority of the players use a combination with continental grip for the bottom hand and Eastern forehand grip for the top hand. A recent study confirms the advantage of the Eastern forehand grip over the continental grip for the top hand to generate racket head speed, but also to reduce the stress on the ulnar side of the top hand's wrist. For two-handed backhand, we can distinguish two major variations related to the hitting arm positions around contact. The first one, with both arms bent at contact, which is very common among WTA players. The second one, with bent bottom arm and straight top arm, which is very common among ATP players. These two variations led to different positions of the top arm at the completion of the backswing, but also to a more independent motion of the top arm in the acceleration phase for the bent strength combination. We are now going to start with the analysis process that we use as coach to observe the performance of our players. The first thing is the definition of the strokes phases to have a common reference. There are three phases defined by the movement of the racket. The preparation phase begins from the displacement of the racket backwards and ends at the moment of reversing the direction. The acceleration phase can be considered from the start of the racket forward movement to the ball contact, and the follow-through phase begins from the contact point and finishes at the end of the racket forward movement. So let's take a look at the three phases with this video to better understand the racket path for the two-handed backhand, a one top-speed handed backhand, and a one slice handed backhand. To go deeper in the analysis of the racket path, you can use 5 key positions. The highest position of the racket, the rearmost position of the racket, the lowest position of the racket position at contact, and finally, the most forward position of the racket. These positions allow to define the amplitude, the orientation, and the speed variations of the racket, but also to analyze the timing of the racket path in relation to the incoming ball and in relation to the actions of the body segments. On this video, you can see how to define the 5 key positions for the 3 previous shots. Now we are going to look more precisely at the different variations for a two-handed backhand. The green line is the racket pass till the highest position. The yellow line is the descent of the racket to the lowest point. The red line is the forward and upward acceleration of the racket. You can see that there are differences in the shape from loopy to more linear. The same for the one-handed backhand, for which we can also see some differences in the shape between players. Although there are some individual differences, mainly in the preparation phase, the zone in which the racket is accelerated seems to look quite similar regarding the path and the timing for each type of backhand. So if we have to compare the two types of backhand from a kinematic point of view and for the same stance and same shot direction, at the end of the backswing, there is more hip and trunk rotation for the one-handed backhand, and there is a separation angle for both types with the trunk rotating further back than the hips. During the acceleration phase, there is more hip and trunk rotation for the two-handed backhand, and there is smaller separation angle for one-handed backhand. At impact, and if we have the same reference, the impact of the one-handed backhand is further forward than for the two-handed backhand. The impact is further forward for a one-handed topspin backhand than for a one-handed slice backhand. In conclusion, the two-handed backhand relies more on trunk rotation for the generation of racket speed, while the one-handed backhand relies more on upper lip rotations. For players using two-handed backhand, the one-handed slice backhand requires a different coordination pattern, while more subtle adaptations are needed by those using a one-handed backhand. This element suggests that players using two-handed backhand should learn the one-handed slice backhand early in the stroke development process. In this way, coaches can focus on promoting the use of continental grip with the bottom hand, as it provides more flexibility for a variety of shots, especially the slice and the backhand volley. Now I will present you a more functional analysis using the kinetic chain principle. The kinetic chain allows to generate force from the ground and to transfer it to the arm to produce high racket speed at contact. The kinetic chain starts from the loading position, which is defined by the body weight mainly on the back leg and the completion of the hip and trunk rotation. Then there is the action of the lower limbs that create linear momentum by stepping into the ball. This action is followed by hip and trunk rotation, which pulls the racket towards the hitting zone. And finally, the arm rotations, which move the racket forward and upward, or downward for a slice, through the contact point. The next video illustrates this functional approach by focusing on the key actions of the body segments to generate racket speed at contact. When we look at the timing between the different actions, we can see that the players use the braking force of the forward step to promote the acceleration of hip and trunk rotation. This element is critical but often underestimated, and you should focus more on it when observing your players. The next video illustrates the interaction between the leg drive and trunk rotation. You will see that the forward step is followed by a strong anchoring on the front leg that initiates the trunk rotation. But also more important, this anchoring is maintained through the contact point. Another interesting point to focus on is the balancing role of the back leg during the acceleration phase. You will see that the back foot moves further behind the body as the forward swing starts. This movement is critical and helps to control an over-rotation of hips and trunk at contact and to promote the forward extension of the arm and racket through the hitting zone. Now let's take a look at the upper limb rotations, starting with the one-handed backhand. What we learned from scientific study is that there is a proximo-distal sequence for the timing of peak linear velocities of the different joints. You can also see in the chart that the maximal velocities increase in ascending order from hip to wrist. The next video will show you how the shoulder, the elbow and the wrist move in the forward swing to accelerate the racket through the contact zone. The vertical line is the most forward displacement of the shoulder, and you will notice the acceleration of the wrist from this point by the distance between the dots on the red line. A greater distance between dots means greater displacements over the same period of time. There are two major rotations at shoulder joint that are responsible of racket speed at contact. The upper arm abduction, mainly involved in the horizontal racket speed, and the shoulder external rotation, mainly involved in the vertical racket speed. The next video illustrates the two different rotations with the variable contact height. You will see how the stabilization on the front leg allows the player to move the racket forward and upward through the contact zone. The upper arm abduction is highlighted by the position of the straight arm in line with the shoulders, and the shoulder external rotation is highlighted by the position of the racket face pointing to the ground at the end of the extension. The next video will show you some exercises aiming at improving the arm rotations for one-handed backhand. Overweighted ball side throw, hitting in the service box using very few backswing to focus on the last part of the acceleration phase, and finally drive volleys. Regarding the two-handed backhand, the proximo-distal sequence is the same that for the one-handed backhand. But what is interesting is to see that the top arm reaches higher peak velocities than the bottom arm, and that these peaks occur at contact. This highlights the importance of the top arm in the generation of racket speed, with the bottom arm having more a stabilization role. There are two major rotations at shoulder joint for the top arm that are responsible of racket speed at contact. The upper arm adduction, mainly involved in the horizontal racket speed, and the shoulder internal rotation, mainly involved in the vertical racket speed. These two rotations are the same as the forehand, but with less amplitude because of the two hands holding the racket. The next video will show you the combination of the pulling action of the bottom arm with the pushing action of the top arm to accelerate the racket both forwards and upwards. You will notice that the straightening of the top arm occurs at the initiation of the forward swing, and that this top arm rotates first backwards to put the shoulder in external rotation. This action is responsible of the drop of the racket head. Then there is a reversal of the rotation, and the shoulder internal rotation moves the racket upwards. You will also notice the independence of the arms in relation to the trunk. With the next video, you will see that the bent-bend combination used commonly among WTA players leads to less independence of the arms in relation to the trunk during the forward swing. It's mainly the trunk that moves the racket toward the hitting zone with an additional pushing motion of the top arm similar as a forehand. Now let's see how to work on this rotation of the top arm with the bend strength combination. The next videos show exercises aiming at improving the technical variability of the backhand shot, especially for the two-handers requiring to use the slice. In this video, I use the double alley to implicitly work on stabilization and forward extension, both for two-handed topspin backhand and one-handed slice backhand. The next exercise is an adaptation of slice with different contact height. This exercise is an adaptation of two-handed backhand with different contact heights. Here we are at the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and that it made you want to know a little more. If so, I invite you to my online courses and to learn more about scientific data and how to translate them into practical and court application. Thank you for your attention and see you soon.